hand if you warm up by playing scales and other well-known technical exercises, such as the Hanon. Most people do. Now, it's not that I have a problem with people practicing scales. Of course I don't. Scales are a wonderful thing to learn. But what I have noticed in my many years of teaching and my experience as an adjudicator for the International Federation of Festivals and as an examiner is that people spend lots of time learning scales and exercises that are unrelated to the piece that they're currently learning. It's much more efficient to take the most challenging parts of the music that you're trying to learn and create your own warm-up exercises, because this will set you up for greater success and it will enable you to learn those notes quicker and more reliably. So in this video I'm going to show you how you can create your own warm-up exercises so that you can make quicker and better progress. My name is Fiona from Learn Music Together, and if you're loving these practice tips, do make sure to hit subscribe so that you get notified every time a new video is released. Now, let's dive into those warm-up exercises. I'm a great fan of using a practice diary, and I want to encourage you to spend some time writing out your own exercises on manuscript paper. By writing things down, you're much more likely to carry out that action, and this also helps you form a stronger connection with the music. This in turn helps us encode the information, which will make things easier when we come to play the notes. Now, as adults, we can be a little reluctant to do this because we're always looking to cut corners. In some ways, when we spend time writing things down, we convince ourselves that we're wasting practice time, because if we're writing things down, we're not actually practicing. But I want you to know that practice is anything related to helping you make progress. We can achieve so much away from our instruments. In fact, recent research shows that you can make almost as much progress with practicing your piece away from your instrument through visualization and memorization exercises if they're done in the right way. It activates the brain in a very similar way to physical practice. So you can make much more progress than you might be aware of without actually physically playing a note. By writing things down, you're making sure that you're prepared for your practice and that you have a clear focus. One of the things I do know about learning to play a musical instrument is 80% of making progress has to do with making a shift in the mindset. It's got nothing to do with practicing your instrument. And it's one of the things that I help my Learn Music Together members achieve. We do mindset momentum calls regularly. So if you're putting up resistance to any of these things, such as writing things down, spending time away from your instrument, thinking of practice in alternative ways, not just physically playing, then I'd highly recommend you check out my video on DSD or my one on my 4 N's. Both of these are great mindset tips which will help you overcome the resistance that you might be feeling to changing your ways. Remember, the brain likes to feel comfortable, so it puts up resistance to change. Why? Because change means exerting more energy, and the brain prefers to conserve energy because its main function in life is to keep you alive. It's not for you to play a musical instrument, which is why we have to challenge ourselves sometimes and why we have to put methods in place to help us develop a growth mindset. So do make sure to check out those videos. So the purpose of warm-up exercises is to improve your technique to make learning a piece easier. Of course, it's also essential that we warm up because we're going, in a way, to do some physical exercise when we practice. So we need to make sure that the muscles are warmed up. And I'd love to show you today a few examples of how you can take ideas from your piece of music that you're currently learning and create some warm-up exercises. Now, not all of the examples that I share with you today will be applicable for your instrument or the piece you're currently learning, but what I'd love you to do today is take a couple of these tips forward and see if you can apply them. One of the most essential ingredients to effective practice is a heightened sense of awareness. And in your warm-up exercises, this could mean focusing on a particular aspect of music, such as your intonation, your fingering, your spatial awareness, your rhythm, your ability to actively listen. Basically, you want to bring to your attention any potential errors so that you can avoid making them. And the idea is to create warm-up exercises that iron out these potential errors before you go ahead and start practicing the piece. Because that way, we're hoping to avoid the errors because prevention is always better than cure. To get started, take your piece of music and make a list of all the technical challenges, places in the music where you think you might do things wrong. Now, it does help if you know your strengths and weaknesses, but don't let that put you off getting started. Try not to procrastinate. Set yourself a timer for maybe 10 minutes and write down a list of all the challenges within the piece. So some of the things you might look for is articulation. You might find it difficult to play staccato. Maybe if you're on the piano, one hand's staccato while the other is legato, and you might find that challenging because you'll be tempted to play them both in the same way. Other ideas include dynamics. Maybe you want to make sure that you're differentiating between the louds and the quiets. Maybe you want to look for scale patterns so that you can practice those in your warm-up. Or perhaps you've got a section of music that's really awkward to play in terms of the finger combinations. So any challenges that you can foresee, write them on your list now. So look for things like articulation, dynamics, awkward fingerings, maybe difficult intervals that are challenging to find because of the stretch within the hands, or maybe they're difficult to play in tune. Perhaps the tonal control will be hard because the two notes cross over the registers. Perhaps there's a bit that's really complex in rhythm that you want to take out and simplify. Whatever those technical challenges may be, put them on a list and think about all the mistakes that you might make before you start practicing. And we're going to go ahead and create some warm-up exercises to make those technical challenges a bit easier. So here's a minuet by Mozart. So let's look at some of the potential challenges within this piece of music. So one of the things that you might do, we look at the first three notes of the piece. There's a slur, and one of the things that you might do is detach that crotchet, that quarter note at the end. And the reason you might do this is because you'll notice that it's a repeated note. The last note of the bar is the same as that crotchet. So what tends to happen is we detach it, we make it more staccato than it should be. Can you hear how I'm making that first crotchet, that first quarter note staccato? Well, that's incorrect. We don't want to do that. That's something that you want to avoid. But it is something that I know as an examiner, I hear it all the time. And it happens because you're setting yourself up for that repeated note. So we could take this bit out and do a warm-up exercise. We could take away the rhythm and just use the notes and play them as quarter notes to practice slurring the three but not shortening the last one. And we could practice that a few times and then maybe try it with the right rhythm. With the emphasis on our focus really being on two things, that slur and making sure that the crotchet is fully sustained. Another potential challenge in this piece is finding the octaves. So in the left hand you can see there's an octave here, and while we're fine going up to the C from the bar before, we then have to make sure that we're ready to stretch down to the octave below C. Now what often happens is people aren't prepared for that big stretch, so we have a gap or a hesitation in the music because you get to that point and then, I haven't stretched out my hand, I need to do that. So one of the things you could practice in your warm-up exercise is stretching out to that octave before you need to. So now my finger's ready to play that C. 1, 2, 3, stretch, 2, 3. And then I could also practice moving my thumb down so it's ready to play the next F. So my warm-up exercise becomes practicing from the B, stretch and move the thumb. Another potential challenge that we've got in this piece is the rhythm between bars 5 and 6. In bar 5 we've got the notes C, E and G written as two quavers or 2/8 notes and a quarter note or a crotchet. But in bar 6 those same three notes are written with the rhythm of a triplet. And what often can happen is that we play one of them too fast or too slow. So a great exercise to do in our warm-up would be to take these two bars and practice counting them in the smallest note value. So if the overall tempo was 80 beats per minute, the speed of one quaver, or 1/8 note, would be 160, but the speed of one triplet eighth note, or one triplet quaver, would be 240. So we could write out a little exercise where we practice playing with the metronome at those speeds. So you might want to start off below tempo, always a good idea to go slowly to ensure we get it right. So I've got 100 beats per minute on my metronome right now. So the first thing I do is vocalize the counts. 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's have a go at playing that. 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now I could increase the metronome speed to 150, because remember triplet quavers are faster, and practice the second example. So let's say the counts again. 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And this time I hold the crotchets or the quarter notes for 3, and that's because there are 3 triplet quavers or 3 triplet eighth notes in a crotchet. So I'll say that again. 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then we'd have a go at playing it. 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you want to know more about maths and music and how to practice counting more effectively with your metronome, I've got a separate video on that. I have a 4-step process to getting the rhythm right. But if you've got any tricky rhythms, creating some exercises to help you ensure that you play them accurately is a great idea. Here's another idea for an exercise to practice spatial awareness again. So we often get caught out when the notes look similar but they're not exactly the same. And you can see here we've got the notes C, E, G for the first bar, C, F, A for the second bar, and then it's back to C, E, G. So the middle bar, if you like, is the odd one out. So all I've done here is, instead of worrying about the rhythm, we were practicing that a moment ago separately, now I'm going to work on finding the notes with ease. So I've just taken the first 3 notes of each bar and written them as crotchets or quarter notes so that I can practice getting the fingering correct. I could make sure that I'm listening to the tone, making sure that all the notes are even. I could try curving my hand a little more to see if that helps. I could try going further into the keys. I like to do an exercise that I call cause and effect. So I'll perhaps play it 3 or 4 times, but each time I'll change something and then I'll write down the effect in my practice diary. And over a long period of time, this can really strengthen your technique. Here's another piece. This one's called A Media Lutz. It's a traditional Argentinian song. And we've got lots of things that we could pull out of this piece to practice in our warm-up exercises. We could take the rhythm at the beginning, which is syncopated. In other words, we've got to play off the beat. And we could build some exercises around that. We could build some exercises around the mordants or around the articulation, because we've got some staccato, we've got some slurring in pairs. That's always challenging. Or maybe we do some exercises on the D major arpeggio that I've just highlighted. There are plenty of ideas, so let's explore a couple of those. Firstly, if you've got a rhythm that you're likely to get wrong, perhaps because it's complicated or syncopated like this one, a great way to start learning that. We talk about slow practice a lot in music, and one of the ways you can slow yourself right down is to double the note values. So you can see on the screen right now, instead of a quaver for the E, I've made it a crotchet. Or instead of an eighth note, it's become a quarter note. And then the C sharp, which was a crotchet, I've doubled it to make it a minim, etc., etc. Now it doesn't look anywhere near as scary to play. So I can get familiar with it at a slower tempo, and I could gradually speed it up over the course of a few days as a warm-up exercise. And what's great about this is I could make a list of metronome marks and gradually tick them off and measure my progress as I go. Another thing we could use that rhythm for is to perhaps practice the D minor scale. So rather than just playing the scale evenly, which you might have done in the past when you've been practicing scales, let's try playing that scale with the rhythm that we're trying to practice from the piece. repeat that, looking to improve it more and more. So I didn't do all the articulation that time. So this time I'm going to focus on the rhythm and the articulation. So there's a couple of ideas that you could do to help you familiarise yourself with that syncopated rhythm. For the mordents, to make sure that we play them evenly, again, we could create an exercise where we build up the rhythm of the notes. So I've taken this one that's on the G, so I'm going to play G, A, G for my mordent. But as you can see on the screen, I've started the exercise by playing in crotchets, and you can do this to a metronome. I've got my metronome set at 72 beats per minute, and we could play. I've gradually built an exercise there to get my fingers moving quicker and quicker. And you could choose to do that daily with a different mordent from your piece. So you can see that the next one is on F. So I could take the notes F and G, start in crotchets, then go to quavers, then semiquavers, etc. So every day you're creating a bit more variety and interest by taking a different mordent to practice. And here's some ideas for that D major arpeggio. You can see we've got the notes D, A, F sharp and D. Well, I could practice it as a D major arpeggio. I could repeat that with different articulation patterns taken from the piece. So I could do all staccato. Do a pattern that's slurred in pairs because we need that in the piece. I could practice it loudly. I could practice it softly. And then of course I could do combinations of things, soft with staccato, soft with slurs. So basically I'm taking things that I need to practice from within the piece and combining that with an arpeggio rather than just doing a basic arpeggio up and down. Of course you could practice it with the rhythm that's there as well, or any other rhythm that you find challenging from the piece. When it comes to warm-up exercises, the choices are endless. You could focus on coordination, you could focus on simplifying the chords, maybe building them up. So if you're a guitarist, for example, and you find shifting between the two chords difficult, you could practice the pattern first of all as separate notes. So let's say you're trying to play a C major chord, and then try combining the three. And then maybe you want to move to an F major chord. Maybe start an exercise where you play chord 1 as a semibreve or a whole note. Think in that time, where's F major, and then move. And you practice that. And as you get better, instead of doing 4 counts, you could do 3 counts. And then you could do 2 counts. Then you could do 1 count. Of course, you could try this really slowly at first on the metronome and gradually get quicker. Maybe if you want to improve dynamics within the piece, you could take one bar that's piano, another bar that's maybe mezzo forte, and another bar that's forte, and play them back to back if you like, so that you can hear whether you're making clear differences in those tonal contrasts or not. So I'd love to give you a challenge today, and that's to come up with 5 warm-up exercises that will help you learn the piece that you're currently studying. I'd love to hear your ideas in the comments below. Please do share. What was your favourite tip today? What can you take forward from this video? What was your favourite tip? What can't you wait to go away and try? And also come back, and if you've had some ideas of your own, please do share them, because sharing is caring and you might give some other people inspiration. And I love hearing all about your learning in your practice sessions and what you get up to. And remember, before I go, make sure you write your warm-up exercises out on manuscript paper. Don't skip this step, because I know it takes some extra effort. It's challenging, it makes us work harder. it's likely that your brain's going to put up some resistance to taking that extra bit of time to write things out because it prefers to conserve energy rather than exert it. So be prepared, and if you find yourself tempted to skip the process, remind yourself that this method will save you time in the long run. And if you find yourself either procrastinating or avoiding doing this task, I've got you covered with a fantastic mindset tip in this next video. But before I go, one last thing, if you're enjoying these music tips and you haven't grabbed my free guide, there's a link on the screen right now. Go and grab it before you hit play on the next video. Bye for now.